Welcome, everyone. I'm Kathleen. I'm going to share some slides, and we're going to kind of do. I'm gonna shoot for a half-hour presentation, but when I get excited about something, sometimes I'll talk a little bit longer. So I'm gonna do my best, and then we'll kind of have like 30 minutes of conversation and Q&A. It might be 15 minutes. We'll see how it goes. And I am just going to ask anyone that is involved, if you have a question or anything during the presentation, feel free to unmute yourself, because I'm going to be looking at slides. It might be tough for me to see if you're like waving your hands around, but you can also try that if you want first. And then we will, get started. And if anyone else comes in, I can't ask them to mute ahead of time because they're not here yet. So I'm just going to go ahead and share, and we'll hope for the best. Cool. All right. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the value cycle. What is the value cycle? Well, that's top secret, and I'm not going to share it till we get there. But it is my goal with today is to give you a framework that you can take to other people you're talking to about community. There are a number of other frameworks I'm going to address, including some really cool ones that have come out of the ComSor community and the community pledge. If you haven't seen it yet, there's a link to that I'll share on. But really, I know one of the biggest challenges as a community manager is convincing other people that your job is real, and also convincing other people in the business that you work in that community is really important. So this is kind of a framework that actually helps kind of talk about how community fits within business and within product strategy. I can hear someone unmuted and I can't see who they are. So I'm just going to refresh the room. I see a couple more people have joined. If you do join, please stay on mute unless you have a question, in which case you can yell at me and say, Kathleen, I have a question right now that needs to be answered. And then I will come back and answer your question. So let's go presenter mode. Okay, so the value cycle. First of all, who am I and why should you listen to me? Well, I'm Kathleen. I have been in community leadership for the last 6 years and product management for the last 3. So I'm actually the head of product right now at GeniusU, which is an entrepreneur education platform. And I ended up stumbling into product management after I had been managing the community. And in my own time, I also consult and run workshops with businesses to create clear community-focused strategies to grow their impact. So I'm big on community. I think it's the core of everything that we do. And it really is what allows businesses to thrive. And I think we're in an age now where more companies are recognizing community as the kind of big center of business that it is. So first, you are not a drop in the ocean, you're an entire ocean in a drop. I think there is something that we forget. I for sure have forgotten over the last year because I've been stuck behind this screen, and I'm sure we're all kind of feeling it, but the connectivity of people is what drives everything. We can step back from even business for a moment and recognize the importance of relationships, the importance of community. And I think it's just important to bring it back to that at the beginning of everything, that we are in fact in this for other people. And in that you are experiencing and can help experience as a community manager, help other people experience what it is to really feel connected and valued and part of something. So just wanted to drop that in there at the beginning to set the tone. Some definitions. We are going to get into the value cycle, but I think there's a few things that are really important to define up front. The first thing is value itself. What is value, right? Easy to think, and harder to define really clearly. So I pulled it from a dictionary. So if something is a value, it's deemed useful or of importance, right? I think also it solves a problem and serves a purpose. If something is really valuable, it tends to speak to someone. It's usually something someone is like, yep, okay, if it's valuable enough, I would pay for it, right? But up at the beginning, it has to really solve a problem for someone. Trust. What is trust? It's to develop trust is to develop a belief in someone, and to have a firm belief that something is reliable, something or someone. I think trust is the currency of everything. If you don't have trust, you've not got very much going for you at all. I think historically, and I think money is just a form of trust, right? That's changing hands because you believe something is of value, right? What is a customer? Someone who buys goods or services. There are so many businesses that they just use customer and community interchangeably. I think that's wrong. I think it's important to distinguish them. However, your community can become your customers, right? And we'll talk about that in a bit. So a customer is someone that pays you money. very clear like delineation there. And a community is a group of people who share interests or beliefs in common with others. That's like feels super watered down, right? We're all in community. We're like, but it's so much more than that. But at its like core, that's the definition of community, right? And it ends up becoming a lot bigger and a lot more powerful the more you dive into it. So what existing models are out there and what can we learn from them? So I'm going to explain the value cycle, which is kind of actually an amalgamation of a few different models. So I want to present those models up front so that we know what's out there and we can kind of see, and there are obviously many, many more that I'm not touching on here, but I think understanding different models, they act as maps or as guidelines that we can actually learn from in many situations. And also models and pretty graphs just like help always explain things to other people in a company or in a business that you're a part of. So I tend to really rely on my slides to communicate effectively to other teams. But I think using some of these models, I hope will be helpful to some of you in your conversations as well. The hooked model. How many people have heard of the hooked model? You can just do a little bit of like jazz hands if you've heard of it, if you've got your camera on. And if you haven't, I have not seen anyone on my screen do jazz hands yet. So, okay, not many people have heard of the hooked model. So this is actually a product-centric model. This is one, it's from a book by an author called Nir Eyal, and it's about how to build habit-forming products. I think we can learn a lot from things that build habits, right? But the whole idea in the hooked model is that there is a trigger that causes an action. So something that the trigger is where a product is actually addressing like a problem at the core of someone. So it's creating value in some way. It causes someone to take an action. So maybe a really simple action. The person who then takes the action gets a reward for taking that action. And then they choose to like they do a little bit of work, which is an investment, which like leads them back around the loop again. We can think about this in terms of community in the sense that like if someone joins a community, right, we like encourage something by creating a trigger. So maybe there's something that prompts them to introduce themselves. Like I know in Slack communities, the first thing that the bot tells you to do is introduce yourself, right? Once you've introduced yourself, you get a reward because people are reacting to that introduction of yourself. And then there's an investment where you then start building relationships with other people in the community. And so you come back around again, right? And then you're triggered to take another action. And so you do so and you get a reward. And then you've made an investment. And at a certain point, you've made so much investment in something that you can't ever leave, right? So this is kind of the model of the hooked model. A lot of like social media and general like tech products use this in quite like a not malicious, but like underlying hidden way, right? Where we put so much, we have like I forget what the name of the fallacy is, but where you feel like you've put so much time into something that you can't leave. I feel that way with Facebook, even though most of my friends are like high school acquaintances that I don't care about anymore, right? But I'm so deep in there that I can't ever leave. So this, like the hooked model can be used for good or for evil, but I suppose that's how it is with all power. The next model I've actually pulled straight out of the community-led model, which was put together by ComStor and like signed off by a bunch of other companies who are all awesome tech companies. So I wanted to share this to give some context of like the levels of community and the model that then follows. I think it's a really great distinguishment between the different kinds of community, right? You always have your like internal team community within your company. You've got your member community, which is people who are part of the internal community, but not part of your team. Your audience, which are people who are like paying attention to you, but maybe haven't joined the internal community yet. And then your market, which are potential customers and people who are even wider reaching, right? So thinking about any of these models in terms of these is really valuable. And then the actual model itself, which implies that at every stage in the business cycle, there's a level of community or community building that's really important to continue the cycle. And if you don't invest in community in any of these areas, then you end up really limiting your ability to grow and the cycle breaks down, right? So there's a lot of, I know in the community space, a lot of companies who don't see, they see community as a cost center, right? They have to put a bunch of money in to bring on a community manager, but community doesn't earn me money. So like, why does it matter? But the reality of it is there's a whole ecosystem in which community does matter. That's why we're all in here doing this stuff. But that actually can then grow the impact of what you're doing as a company if you do invest in community. I love this model. I think it's super valuable. I think that it fits very well in with the value cycle model. And there's kind of, you know, while we can see this, it's still not entirely explaining to a product team directly, like how does community fit in with like their cycle as well. This is like the community cycle, but I think it's a really valuable infographic. So go and check out Community Led if you haven't already. And then of course we have like the funnel model. We all love business funnels. It kind of gives you like a bit of a squeamish feeling, right? The same way as I think MLMs make some of us feel now. We're like, ooh, funnels, that doesn't feel good. Like how do we add community to that? What does community look like in that? I love this infographic because I think it's very straightforward and really shows you like how to move people through at every stage. So this example is really great at showing you how to convert a follower into a community member, into a prospect, into a customer. So followers pay you attention and they're, you know, on social media or like showing up, but not really like, they're just kind of skimming by. They might give you a like on a video. A community member is really giving you time. So this is where you've got someone who is like showing up to a webinar or is getting results by like reading something that you've put out. They're really like now investing time in what you're putting out. That moves someone into being a prospect where they're actually willing to buy from you. There's a level of trust that they're feeling towards you, right? They maybe have seen, like, I know if I've seen like an ad multiple times and I follow the account of the person who has published the ad, I'm more likely to go and actually engage with that. Once you're in the prospect space, you can then move into a customer, right? Where someone's actually going to step in and get a transformation of some sort. So this model I think is great, but it doesn't, and you know, it kind of, you see a little arrow here, it feels a bit understated, but okay, someone's like bought from you, they've benefited, and now you're going to move them back into the community space, right? So this is kind of like getting closer to the value cycle, but not quite there yet. The value cycle is a model that I feel like addresses parts of each of those models, but really, and this is obviously not the value cycle, this is the water cycle, but I'm using it as an example of the value cycle. So the idea is you are moving someone through at every point in the journey into like not just a, you know, a funnel where they're coming out the other side, but really like enhancing someone's experience through providing so much value, building so much trust that they continue staying with you. And I think this is where we're seeing, you know, we talk all the time about like lifetime value of customers, or we're talking about, you know, like, you know, how are we building ongoing communities and kind of like brand allegiance. That's not the word I'm looking for, but the other one's on the tip of my tongue. So, you know, how are you actually moving people through and keeping them engaged with you? And I think one of there's a couple places that community fits into this, right? And the way that it fits into the business model as well. So the value cycle takes followers and brings them into community, the people who are giving you their time. It moves people then through to prospects who are giving you their attention. So you're creating experiences for people that causes them to actually engage with you more. It turns people into customers where people are paying you money, back into raving fans. So people who are coming back over and over again, right? But they remain a part of the community. They become your biggest advocates. They become the community managers, even though they're part of the community, right? And then that's like, you know, the community becomes like the all-encompassing space that each of these things moves through. And there's a handful of different tools that you can use at every point in the journey, the types of content you're creating, the way you're engaging with people to actually continue this cycle with momentum so that people are feeling really engaged, they're feeling a high level of trust, they're feeling very connected to one another, and they're feeling connected to whatever the mission of the business is, right? Obviously, like all of these things that I'm sharing don't work if the business doesn't have a super clear mission or doesn't have a super clear way that they're adding value. So I think that work is important to do like in front of this or leading into this. I have all sorts of like templates and tools and stuff. So if you're part of a company right now that's at the very early stages and doesn't have that clarity yet, feel free to reach out to me after this. But really what I'm addressing here with this part, the value cycle itself, is like, okay, if you have a clear mission, you have a clear vision, you've got like a really solid team, how are you then actually using community as part of your growth, right? So that's where the value cycle comes in. So for each of these areas, there's kind of like the tools or techniques or the things that you're wanting to do to actually move people through the model and also like have people get the most value out of every stage. Like, I don't think that people, while we put a lot of investment into the community who are members, I think it's equally as important to to put time and energy and effort into the community who are not yet members, right? Who are your followers. It's equally as important to put time into the people who are your community, who are your customers and are buying products from you, right? And for every kind of avatar at each stage, wherever someone is in the journey, there are different tools and techniques that you're using to actually engage with them more and provide them the most value. So on the followers side, we talk about having a diamond. So what's like the diamond that you're providing for your followers? And a diamond is a story or something really shareable that people are able to get a lot of value from, but that also allows them to share that out with other people, right? So, and it's a free resource because they're just following you. They're not actually looking to pay you money at this point. You're still in the very early stages of building trust. And so it might be something like a toolbox of tools or a video or an audio snippet. So like podcasts, right? Or YouTube videos or, other social media where you're actually just providing free content. It might be a download or a post or an article. And obviously the old model of this is moving people onto an email list. The much newer model is moving people into a free community where they can engage with one another and you still have access to speaking to them. And like the rainmaking principles in this phase are to like really love your customer intensely. This is why it's so important to be clear on who you're speaking to, right? Who is your customer avatar? Who are you serving? Making it eye-to-eye personal, which means that you're actually speaking directly to that person. You're not generalizing a statement. You're not like making it an all-encompassing thing, but you're speaking really directly to someone. Like I know the best articles and stuff that I really love is where I feel like I'm being addressed, like my problems are being spoken to. I'm getting the exact answers I'm looking for. And similarly with podcasts where I feel like I could be friends with this person, they really understand me. So making it that level of personal is really important. Making sure that people are heroes, not victims. So you're not just speaking to them about their problem, right? You're speaking to them about who they are when that problem is solved. So always, I think showing people the best version of themselves is really important. There's also, this loops into the community side as well when you're actually making heroes of the people in your community, right? You're saying these are the people who we aspire to be like, I think is important as part of this whole cycle. So always thinking about the positive rather than the negative spin. And making it so people say, who do I have to share this with? I so, resonate with this piece of information or this piece of content or this piece of value. Someone else I know needs this. So who do I have to share this with? That's the kind of question you want people walking away with when you're providing them a diamond in the early phase. The community, which I guess here we're talking more about people who are giving you time. So they're not just, or they're giving you attention. So they're actually showing up and they're saying, okay, I'm not just following you. I actually want to engage now. So, if you've had someone click on, the free video or whatever, and they're like, oh, I really resonate with this content. I want to be part of this community. This is at that phase, even before someone has paid money. And obviously you have the different levels of community, but this is considering just kind of that initial stage, which is thinking about, and it also adds value to the community once it is a member community, but thinking about what the zero cost scalable gold dust is that grows and engages your community to invest their time and share. So you want to create value to speak directly to people, right? But you also want to have them able to share it really easily and rewarded for sharing it really easily. So whether it's tests and quizzes, gamified apps, competitions, awards, referral rewards, and connection opportunities, I think networking events are an amazing way to do this right now because people are looking to get connected with other people, right? And it's also really shareable because if I have a link to a connection event that I know other people are going to benefit from because they're part of that audience, then I'll share that and that people will show up, right? So it becomes you can actually automate it in some way, right? If you decide you're doing an event every couple of weeks, you can then set up things ahead of time and it reduces the amount of time that you have to spend on manually setting things up. It should be low cost or profitable. So this is kind of where you don't want to be pouring more and more time into one thing, but you want to be able to kind of go super wide as well. So I think providing value without causing intense cost to yourself is really important. And as a community manager, what that looks like is being able to systematize what you're doing, right? Because when you have a community as it scales, there's so many things you have to do. So finding ways to work smarter, not just harder, is really important. It shouldn't take more of your time because otherwise every event that you create, time is not as scalable. But also if it does end up that you're in a position where you're I just don't have time for this, but I know it would be super valuable, then scaling team is the other side of that. moving through to prospects, which is where you're actually providing an experience for someone. I think we as community, like in the community space, are often thinking about this anyway. But when you're kind of explaining this journey to people who are looking at community and saying, well, how does this turn into customers, or how are we using this as not just a cost center of the business? Considering prospects as a separate stage to community is really important, because it's where you're actually moving people into an experience of some sort. You want this to be like high tech and high touch, which just means that it's, it feels very personalized to people, and it should be very like, you should be speaking to people directly as you're doing this, but high tech in that it's easier to multiply or, make larger, or invite more people into. But something that's going to build trust in your ability to problem solve as a business. So whatever problem it is that you're speaking to as a business, making sure that this experience speaks directly to that, and it guides people into a decision to buy, because it increases the trust to that level. The kinds of things that happen at the experience side are like one-to-ones or workshops or events. Webinars are a big one that have been used. And I've put community in here, which sounds maybe a bit redundant because you've got community in an earlier stage. But I think there are like high-tech, high-touch community experiences where you're, actually getting people together to have a conversation that become really valuable and that build a lot of trust in the people who are leading that community, right? Which might then move into, a purchase decision. It should build high touch trust. You want to co-create the solution with the people who are showing up. So if you're running a workshop or a one-to-one, there has to be the level of the customer also expressing what the problem is and getting to a solution themselves. So it's not just direct solving a problem by, creating a very straightforward blueprint, but actually like asking what the problem is and working through that together. And it should create flow. So what does that mean? That's, actually making it easier for someone to do what is in flow for them. So ultimately solving a problem, like creating more cohesion through the process of solving the problem, rather than making things difficult or stopping things moving, right? And then customers. So customers are the people who have, been part of an experience and they move into a transformation. So what is the actual high-tech, high-touch transformation that all your customers will go through that's worth their money, and it makes them want to come back and, return or recommend you? The way that transformations work, they should always solve a problem, which means, a problem that someone has identified themselves that they have. It should serve a purpose, which means that it's not just about the problem itself, but it's about like the longer term vision. So for example, if the problem is that, let's think of a quick example. So if the problem is that that people don't know how to measure their communities, they don't have a way of tracking how successful their community is, the purpose that serves is much larger, right? It's to actually make communities part of business as usual, right? Like community should be a core tenet of business as usual, because it allows people to connect, it allows people to feel empowered, and ultimately leads to a more connected and just society. Like that's a big purpose, right? But the problem seems a lot smaller and more at the beginning. So it's important that any transformation does both of those things. It solves a problem and it serves a greater purpose. And the reason for that, right? Why should it serve a purpose? Is because it allows you room to create a pathway, right? Like a transformation is not a one-time thing that happens. Someone buying from you should not be, like, oh, that's it. Okay, let's move on to the next one, right? Like if your customers are really your community and they're people you really care about because they're also driven towards a similar purpose to you, then you have the opportunity to create pathways and ongoing solutions and ongoing connections, and also empower other people in that space where you don't have a bunch of businesses who are competing, but rather collaborating, because you're all moving towards a shared purpose, a different version of the world, right, than the one we live in now. And then the 3 levels of transformation are around self-awareness, self-mastery, and self-expression. So actually being aware of what's like problem aware of what's going on, but also aware of how you fit into a larger picture. Mastery, where you're actually able to like master a skill set or like understand better how to like work based on who you are or work better in a team, etc. And self-expression, where you're able to go out and like actually make a difference or create something or be a part of something that allows you to like express a truest version of yourself. So a transformation should fit into one or all of those categories in some way. And that's really like how you're bringing someone on board as a customer. And also keeping in mind that like, I think there's a lot of block around like sales more generally. And on the community side, they can feel like there's a block around sales because you don't ever want to like the the energy around selling can feel quite toxic. Just, I think the last 10 years have kind of like impacted the way we think about sales and money and like as businesses selling people into things, right? I think when you think about sales, not as selling someone something, but rather as helping someone get to a solution that they're willing to pay money for because they see it as valuable, right? Helping someone have a transformation that is leading them to a better version of themselves that also they're willing to pay for because it's valuable, right? That kind of flips the script and is really important to think about as well, because I don't think you should ever be sales averse in the same way as you should never be product averse or community averse, right? Like all of these things work together in a cycle as well. And then, of course, moving people into raving fans, which just means they're staying a part of a community and they're moving through again. And it's like, what is the actual halo that you nurture around your pathway? What is the pathway if you think about the different, the way that people are evolving as they're part of your community? How is it allowing them to self-improve? How is it allowing them to grow? Who is it allowing them to become? And so community is obviously the top of this, but I think hopefully you're getting my point that community runs through every single stage of this, which is why it's so important in business. Obviously having things like a loyalty program, some kind of rewards or referral program is always really valuable. An actual partner pathway. So what does that mean? That means that there's a pathway that's aligned with your product or your business that allows people to partner with you. So it might look initially like having affiliates or event partners or people that earn money by working with you, right? So allowing people to grow with the company as well. And the other side of that is an investor pathway. So how can you get people involved to be able to be part of investing in the company and the future of the company? And that might look like financial investment, or it might look like time investment, right? Volunteering, or actually like providing, workshops or things like that, where they feel like they're a part of what you're doing. One of the things that we did at GeniusU was, rather than going out and seeking external investment, our community members became our investors because they believed so much in the mission of the company. And now we have a thriving investor community who all are part of, like, they have partial ownership of GeniusU, but also that community has grown and are investing in other impact-driven projects together. So creating community around different areas of your business actually allows those parts of your business to grow as well, which can be really valuable. And overall, like, the principles are frictionless growth that create flow every time. Like, everyone in each of these areas should be able to feel like they're able to do it with ease. It's not a difficult thing to do. You shouldn't make it difficult if you have a partner pathway for people to grow, but ultimately knowing that, like, anyone on the planet is generally looking for some level of like self-improvement and fulfillment, right? Like, most people are just looking for whatever it is that's going to help them, in their life feel good. And in many cases become a better version of themselves. So the more we can promote that through business and through community, the better. And so as a whole, to kind of wrap this up, I don't know how I've done on time because I can't see anything through my slides. Okay, we're at half an hour. Wow, nailed it. So basically, the key here is that people will forget what you said, what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I love this quote. It's a very like warm and fuzzy quote, but I think also, like, realistically looking at this through the lens of community, knowing that community is present in every single stage of business. But if you look at the value cycle and the way it's so much about creating value for others, that value should always be empowering people. That value should always be making people feel like they are more capable, or like they have, more clarity about what they're doing next. Whatever the feeling is you're giving people in a community as a community manager or community strategist, like, that's where so much of the value in business comes as well, right? Because it is all cyclical. It does allow people to come back, engage more, and obviously co-creating the solutions with the people in your community is so crucial.